What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown for UFC Vegas 53. I'm your boy Clint. This is Pub Sports Radio, and these lines are all brought to you by Superbook Sports. You may notice I'm wearing my glorious purple and gold. It's draft day, baby! Go Vikings! Looking for some help on the O-line and the defense. What we're doing today, we're talking about fights. We're talking about overs. We're talking about unders. This show specifically is set to see if we can find value on the totals that are being offered at UFC Vegas 53. So let's dive straight on into it. First fight of the night, we've got Tarucio Tiara taking on Carlos Candelario. Couple of UFC debutants. Candelario, a guy we know from the Contender Series. Tiara, though, this kid's a beast. Like, if you look at his regional footage, you see he's a finisher. He's got lots of submissions. He likes to attack the leg kicks. He really forces the action here. Carlos, on the flip side, I like the wrestling from this kid. It's kind of a tale of two fighters, because I think if Tatsuro does what he is supposed to do in this fight, if he fights like he usually does, there's going to be a finish. Whether it's him being exposed as not quite being UFC caliber, making the shift over to the United States regional, MMA scene and having that level jump be a bit of too much of a difference for him, he could definitely get finished by someone like Carlos Candelario. But the flip side of that is Candelario could potentially grind on him. He's a wrestler. He can take him down. He can try and stay in top position. Nobody so far has had that kind of success doing that with Tatsuro, and because it's going to take place a lot of this on the mat, that opens up that submission upside. I think there's going to be violence. I think this line set at 2.5. We've got a pick 'em price tag, -110 on both sides. First fight of the night, I would be looking under. Second fight of the night, Gina Mazany taking on Shanna Young. Total set at 2.5, the over -170, the under is +150. I think the line is set the way that it is, not quite as juiced as most women's MMA fights, is because we've seen from Gina Mazany that she has this sheer overpowering strength, and she can use that to maul and TKO her opponents, but she also has a rough gas tank, and if she mismanages her gas, she tends to fold up and get out of there at the earliest opportunity. So if Shanna Young is better than some people are speculating this week, I know she's not a popular underdog, but if she actually shows up in this spot, if she forces Gina Mazany to grapple, there's a chance that she could turn the tables and maybe get her out of there. Now, we have seen from Shanna Young that she accepts bottom position. She's been taken down and out-wrestled in the UFC basically at will, but dropping down to 125, that might change everything. So I'm going to lean over. I'm going to say this is a grappling match. I think Gina Mazany does a better job of protecting herself, even if she does gas out in this fight, but I do think we're going to end up seeing a grindy, close split type of fight where you're not quite sure who won at the end, but over 2.5 at -170 seems like a decent shot. Mike Brito taking on Natan Levy. Total again set at 2.5 for this one. Over 2.5 is -175. The under 2.5 +155. Brito is coming out of Glory MMA, so we know what he brings to the table. A lot of his teammates have kind of the same style. He really reminds me almost of like a Raw Dog type. He doesn't have great offensive wrestling. He's got decent defensive wrestling, good in scrambles, good submissions, likes to be in your face, really aggressive with the attack and the onslaught, offensively speaking. Natan Levy's got more of a karate style. He's coming out of Syndicate Mixed Martial Arts, I believe. I'm getting the name wrong on that one. He doesn't train out of Syndicate MMA. I do apologize. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, he does. Okay, I'm right. I'm not going crazy. He does train out of Syndicate MMA, but he's another hyped up prospect that a lot of people were saying basically belonged in the UFC some time ago. Dropped his UFC debut, getting a step down in competition here. They're really expecting him to show up and win. But is he going to knock out someone like Mike Brito? I don't know that he's necessarily going to be able to finish somebody like Mike. I think, again, we could get kind of a grappling-heavy game plan. And if Natan Levy is a guy that gasses out and slows down, maybe Mike can kind of overwhelm him and get a TKO with volume. But besides that, I don't see him having that one-hitter-quitter style power. And I don't know that Mike Brito is savvy enough to submit Natan Levy. So I'm going to say over again. I'm going to say over 2.5 at -175 for that fight. Johan Lainez taking on Gabe Green. Twitter's war ground this week here. Really closely aligned fight. We've got Gabe Green 1-1 in the UFC. We've got Johan Lainez coming in here off of a very impressive KO on the Contender Series. Total set at 1.5. The over 1.5 is -125. The under 1.5 is +105. Now, Johan, this is a guy 8-0, basically knocks everybody out. I think he's got one decision on his entire, MMA professional run. Gabe Green, on the other hand, he's a guy that's shown to be incredibly tough, incredibly durable, survives and scrambles, and, forces his way through to the next level. He's been knocked out twice, though, so there's a chance that Johan catches this guy because he's not the most defensively sound fighter out there. However, I do think that Gabe Green is the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. He relies on volume. He mixes in grappling and wrestling, and he was able to survive on the ground with my guy Phil Rowe. I think he's the more well-rounded martial artist, and I think if Johan is not able to land that one-hitter quitter on him, then he ends up just getting melted by Gabe Green. But for the total, what I would do is I would very much side on the durability of Gabe Green and say that Johan is tough enough. We've seen him get to the second round. We have seen him go to decision before. So even if Gabe Green is able to flip the script on him, I think he only gets him out of there once Johan's tired. So I do think this goes over the 1.5 rounds, and we probably get to the late second or the early third, in my opinion. Daniel Da Silva or Daniel Lacerda, whichever one you want. It's listed basically everywhere opposite. Taking on Francisco Miniature Figueiredo at 125. Total set at 2.5 for this one. The over 2.5 is minus 120. The under 2.5 is plus 100, even money for violence. And honestly, guys, I do not have a good read on this fight. I don't trust little Figueiredo at all. I don't like anything I've seen from him. He's strong physically. He's okay striking, but he plays with his hands low. It does seem like he's got his brother's durability, so that's going to be something that kind of favors the over, in my opinion. Daniel Da Silva, lots of kicks. Big kicking game, so I could see the leg kick, the calf kick, kind of taking his opponent's legs out and making it hard for this thing to get over. But if he doesn't have success with that, I could very much see a grappling, heavy point striking type of affair. And I think both these guys are in must-win situations. So I think we maybe see a bit of a more careful approach. It's low-level MMA, so finishes happen to, come across a little bit more often, especially when somebody gets exposed in a certain area. But I think I would plug my nose and I'd take the over 2.5 at minus 120 if I had to. Next up, Alexander Romanov, Chase Sherman. This thing's going under. I expect it to be over in the first round. Superbook does not have a line up for the total, so let me go see if I can find an alternate out there for us to talk about. We broke this one down last week, so it shouldn't be too surprising for anybody. Yeah, 1.5. Over is plus 225, the under minus 300. Nobody's expecting this thing to get out of the first round, and I think that makes perfect sense given what we've seen from Chase Sherman on the ground and given what we've seen from Alexander Romanov in the shape that he showed up in last week. So hopefully we at least get to see this fight. I do expect it to be over rather quickly. Next fight on the board, it looks like we've got GM3 Gerald Meerschaert taking on Krzysztof Jotko. Total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 minus 115. The under 2.5 is minus 105. And this is a tale of two fighters because Gerald Meerschaert is really reliant on the finish. He doesn't ever win decisions. He's relatively low volume. He's got decent boxing. He's got good accuracy with his hands and he hits hard, but he really likes to club and sub people. Or once he wears you out from fighting with him, he can take advantage of you deep in the fight, and that's when he tends to tap people out as the third round. He's the third round king. We see it over and over and over again. Krzysztof Jotko, on the other hand, is a decision machine. He's kind of got pillow fists. He sits down on his punches, and every once in a while he takes a big crack at somebody, but he's super low volume himself. Once he hits you once, he doesn't really follow up on it. He kind of sits back and waits for the fight to reset itself, and all of his decisions are close, and they're gritty, and they're dirty. A lot of them are splits. I expect it to go over, but Gerald Meerschaert is a guy that I historically have an awful read on, so it's probably going under. Gerald Meerschaert can't stop a right hand, and as much as Krzysztof Jotko is a guy that's been hard to take down, once he gets you tired, Gerald Meerschaert finds a way, whether it's jumping guard or whether it's jumping on your back and climbing you like a tree, he'll do whatever it takes. So it will not surprise me whatsoever if Gerald Meerschaert pulls this off again, because he just always seems to, especially whenever I count him out. So I'm saying over 2.5, not touching it from a betting perspective. Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connelly is up next. Total again set at 2.5 for this one. The over is minus 200. The under is plus 175. Now last week we talked about violence all over the card. It's kind of the opposite this week. Most of these fights are set as grinds. I think it's going to be a long night with lots of 3-round decisions for us as fans here. I like that over 2.5. I really do. Tristan Connelly is a high-level grappler. He's got a black belt in BJJ. He's got solid wrestling. We saw what he did to spoil the debut of Michel Pereira, so we know he can take somebody down and fight that kind of game plan for 15 minutes. Darren Elkins always ends up in a bloody mess of a war, and that's just how it is. But I don't know that Tristan Connelly is the guy. Tristan is not the kind of guy that's going to drop the mitts and just go at it, ham, bare knuckle in the middle of the cage. He doesn't do that. He's cerebral. He's a thinker. He does like to get in your face. He does like to cut the cage off and stay right there, pressure on you. So I do think that he's going to have some success doing that with Darren Elkins, but I could see Darren Elkins mixing in some takedowns himself, turning this thing into a grappling grind, less blood and guts, more singlet on for both of these guys. So I think we're going to go over that 2.5, but with the way Darren Elkins is, with the way he gets hurt, with the way he bleeds, with the way he gets cut, you can never count out some kind of a stoppage. He takes advantage of people being exhausted, and he gets the finish that way. He's not a one-hitter quitter type, so I don't think he's going to bomb on Connelly and get him out of there with a single shot, and I trust Connelly's gas tank to not be the kind of guy that fades out in the second round where Darren Elkins can just do whatever he wants to you. I do think this thing's going the full 15 minutes. Next fight up, we got Jared Gordon taking on Grant Dawson. Another 2.5 total here for this one. And again, I have to side with that over. Jared Gordon is a guy that I like to look at the KO props on. We know he's got those chin concerns. Some of the guys he's been knocked out by, though, are super high level. So we can't count on him just being knocked out all the time. And Grant Dawson is not exactly a knockout artist. On top of that, I know a lot of people don't really listen to the fighter interviews or take much from it. I do. I think you can get into the mind of the fighters, especially know where their, game plan is and what they're looking for. You got to be careful. Some of them lie, but some of them, like Grant Dawson, they wear their heart on their sleeves, and you can pull a lot from what they say. He was talking about not looking for the knockout. Someone asked him bluntly if he felt that would be something he could expose. And he said, no, I'm going out to prove that my cardio is on point, because in his last fight, he gassed out after the second round and was helpless in round 3. He said, I'm going to shoot takedowns until he breaks or until I submit him. So that tells me this thing is going over, because Jared Gordon, he's not a guy that you submit. He's a good, strong counter wrestler himself. He's got a great gas tank, and even if he is a little bit undersized, even if he is out-muscled, he knows how to stay safe on the ground. I think the KO or the TKO is kind of the only way this thing ends. If Gordon wins, it's because it went the distance, or it's because Grant Dawson once again has a dump and he gets TKO'd in the third, but I don't really see that happening. I think this one's going over the 2.5. Minus 200, I like that. Next up, we got Joanderson Brito taking on Andrei Fili, and this is a tough fight for me. Total again set at 2.5. The over is minus 175. The under 2.5 is plus 155. Andrei Fili tends to be a point striker. He's a guy that's super well-rounded everywhere, likes to drag the fights deep, really puts on a show, exciting striking. He's a fun guy to watch. Joanderson Brito, he is a mauling, physically powerful grappler who closes the range by winging bombs and trying to put you unconscious, and then if you're not unconscious, he'll grapple you and look for submissions. Well, Andrei Fili is the guy that I would kind of lean with going to this over, but the last fight we saw him, holy crap, that fight should have gone under. He was destroying Pineda in round 1, and that fight really probably could have been stopped. So I don't know what Fili we're going to get this week, and I think a lot of this depends on that, because if he's coming out here looking for blood again, this could very easily go under. If Joanderson Brito is winning this fight, it's probably going to be grappling heavy, and we have seen Fili struggle with the takedowns. I'm going to lean with this fight going over. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Andrei Fili comes out, shows us a new level, has evolved yet again, and beats the brakes off of Brito. There's always the chance that Brito clubs and subs. There's always the chance that Brito hits him with one of those home run overhands, and this thing is over. So another total that I want no part of from a betting perspective, but I will say over for the sake of the show. Co-main event, Jake Collier. Yes, I know, Collier. I was on the Canadian train on the show calling him Collier. I don't know why. We do so many damn countries and pronunciations of names. I messed that one up. So Jake Collier taking on Andrei Arlovski on this co-main event here. Total set at 2.5. Minus 205 to the over 2.5 and plus 180 to the under 2.5. And like I said, just like last week, we were looking at unders. We're looking at overs this week. I think this over makes a ton of sense. Andrei Arlovski is an over machine. He doesn't kill anybody in there. Now, Jake Collier is a guy who has been hurt at heavyweight. He has been knocked out at heavyweight. We've seen him gas out and slow down at heavyweight. Like, if Andrei was going to knock somebody out, maybe this is the guy. I don't want to count on it, though, And Jake Collier has talked about coming in here aggressively. If Andrei slips up, he plans to finish him the way he did Chase Sherman. I don't think you're getting Andrei's back quite that easy. I know we saw that happen just recently, but it was not a fighter the caliber of Jake Collier that pulled that off on Andrei Arlovski. So I'm not expecting Andrei to get finished. He knows how to go 15 minutes. He knows how to manage his gas tank. He manages risk better than anybody I have ever seen. He's going to open up a hedge fund place after he retires from the UFC because he manages risk so well. Jake Collier, not much of a finisher at the UFC level. Finishing Chase Sherman in the first round doesn't do much for me. I'll say over 2.5 at the minus 205 price tag. Main event time, Rob Font taking on Marlon Chito Vera. Total set at 4.5 for this one, and this should be one hell of a fight. Over 4.5 is juiced minus 155. Yet again, the judges are expecting, or the bookies are expecting this thing to go the full distance. Under 4.5 is plus 135 in this spot. And with Chito Vera on the fight card, I couldn't be insulted for going under for this one. This is a spot where the way this kid fights, he breaks people. We saw Rob Font take some big shots in his last fight against Jose Aldo. He was able to dig deep. He was able to get through it. He survived, but it wasn't pretty. It looked like he could have gone out almost at any point with some of those big shots, and that's the kind of thing that Chito Vera will do to you. The thing is, Rob Font's only been finished once. He's got one loss, and it's by sub. Believe it or not, I'm probably going to bet Marlon Vera by submission because it's something ridiculous like 8-1. I think that Vera's going to have success in the grappling department. I think he'll be able to crowd Rob Font, pin him up against the fence, bully him physically, and the longer this fight drags on, especially if Vera continues to go to the ground, I think he opens up the opportunity for a sub. If he doesn't pull that off, Vera's made out of steel. He doesn't get finished. Nobody's finishing this kid. I don't care how pinpoint accurate Rob Font is. He's a guy that doesn't get KOs. He went the distance with Cody Garbrandt. Like, if that tells you anything, Cody's got no chin left. I thought Rob Font was going to knock him clean out easily. Instead, he outclassed him for a 5-round fight because he couldn't get the KO. Rob Font is a point striker. Rob Font's not a knockout guy. So I think if you've got a guy who historically has been extremely durable and tough to finish versus a guy who historically is not much of a finisher and he's more of a point striker, I don't expect Rob Font to do anything except win this fight by decision if it's going to happen. I think Chito Vera is the finishing side if he does get it done. So you're kind of picking your fighter here, but I do think Chito Vera using the grappling heavy approach could also win a decision. Both guys being tough, both guys being durable. The only way I can look in this spot from a betting perspective is over at the minus 155 price tag. That's the total takedown, folks. Do me a favor, hit that like button for me, support the show. We'll see you tomorrow for the undefeated post weigh-in, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Let's line those pockets. Let's roll.